Good morning. Today I'm going to show you how I feed my sourdough starter. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a kitchen scale that you can weigh in grams, a bowl to put on your scale, and a spoon. I like a long-handled spoon. It's just easier to get into the jars. I've got my flour. I use all-purpose, and I also use bread flour. I go back and forth. It doesn't really matter. It's what I have that day. I have a bottle of spring water, which I keep under the counter so it stays room temperature. And I have my two starters here that are active that I'm using. And a jar of discard that I keep in the fridge that I've just pulled out. So what I do first is I'll take my jar here, and you can see I have a rubber band to show where I start. I've already wiped off the markings that I had on here from before. And the first thing I'm going to do is open up and mix it. So I'm going to put this over here, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing as I go. So this jar is who I call Pickles, and Pickles has a metal lid here. I just have this part because it's fancy, and it helps keep any bugs or whatever away from the edge of the jar, which I've seen a lot of problems with lately for other people doing this. Alright, so let's mix up pickles. Because I want to make bread with pickles today, so I definitely want to have a nice active starter to work with. So pickles is already nice and thick. Nice thick starter. It didn't have hooch on the top. It didn't separate. This is a nice active starter that I made bread with the other day, and it came out gorgeous. Alright, so first I'm going to measure out my grams. So for this starter, because I want to use it today, I'm going to keep 100 grams of it. And the rest of this I'm going to put into my discard jar here. And my discard jar is kind of full because I haven't done any discard recipes yet, but I do intend to try some soon. Like I might try some pancakes this morning that I've never done before. So I'm not going crazy cleaning out the jar. I'm just doing a quick scrape because I'm using this jar again, and I don't really care if it's on the sides or whatever because I'm going to be using it later today. Now, if you're going to have your jars sitting around not doing much with them, you probably should be wiping the sides and like really keeping up on it. And most people recommend that you clean your jars or switch to a clean jar about once a week so the stuff that piles up on the side doesn't mold up on you. Alright, so I've got my jar wiped up here. Put my discard lid back on so I know it's not the one I'm working with, and put that to the side. Now, move this jar over so you can see what I'm doing with the bowl. And always have some paper towel handy because you're going to need it for either putting your spoon down or wiping your fingers or wiping the jar. I'm going to get a new piece because I'm going to move my spoon. I'm going to move my spoon over here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my flour. And right now I'll show you my scale. It says 105, which is fine. It's a little heavy. And I'm going to add my flour until it says 200 because I'm doing a 1-to-1 feeding for this. This starter's nice and active. 1-to-1 will be fine for what I'm doing. Okay, I'll just make that a little heavy because it started out a little heavy. Okay, now this I'm going to need 2 hands for. So now I'm going to put my flour on the side, and I'm going to get my water. So I use bottled spring water because the tap water in my area is very hard and it does calcium deposits and it's a mess. So I'm just not dealing with that. So my spring water, which is room temperature here, I'm going to pour in until my scale here reads 300. Okay, 300. There we go. Now I like to take this off the scale, stir it, and just lightly, gently stir it together so that you don't splatter it all over, because flour does that. I'm going to give it a good mix to get everything incorporated. Put this over here so you can see what I'm doing. Give it a good mix. Just make sure that you haven't missed any clumps of flour anywhere. You want that all incorporated. Now I'm going to get my jar and I'm going to add it in. So you can see as I pour this that this is a clumpier batter. Everyone has a different preference for how thick their sourdough is. They say a thick pancake batter is what you're looking for, but depending on the type of flour you use, your area, your humidity, all that different factoring, it could be thicker or thinner. So mine starts out really thick like this and kind of thins a little bit more after being fed. Trying to get all this in the jar. It's all stuck to my spoon. Okay, now here's the best tip for you. This bowl is going straight into the sink and I'm running water in it immediately. Otherwise, it will become like cement and you won't be able to get it clean. I'm just going to leave that sit there for a minute while I'm dealing with my jar. So I'm going to clean the edge of my jar. Make sure nothing is stuck on the edge of it, because I saw something had been stuck to it before when I took my fabric top off. So I must have had a little left over there. Okay. Now I'm going to take the top of my jar and I'm going to cover it like this. And here's something you need to know. I do not want this jar tight down, because as this grows, it's going to expand and it needs to be able to exhale. It doesn't need to be able to breathe in, it just needs to be able to get the air out. So I'm going to put my little cloth over because it's cute. And then I'm going to take my top and I'm just going to lightly turn it just enough to get to stay there, but you can see there's this gap here so the top can actually breathe out. So this jar is done. I'm going to get my marker and I'm going to lay, well actually, let's see. I'm going to make sure my rubber band is lined up all around. Sorry about my little guy, he just woke up. So then I'm going to note on here, I like to get my dry erase markers that I use for my fridge calendar. And I like to write on here. So I did 100 and added 100, which is a 1-to-1 ratio. And I did it at 9:20 a.m. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to make bread from it in about 3 to 4 hours. So I need to know what time I did this. All right, so my first one is done, and it's gonna go sit over on top of my dishwasher because my jars seem to really like hanging out over there as opposed to a different part of the counter. Now I'm gonna do pickles the second. Pickles the second. So pickles the second is not my active starter today. I'm not using it for my bread. I'm just maintaining it to have a second one because I'm gonna give some away, so I need some extra. So I'm gonna put the top of this. So pickles the second, I'm using just a napkin with a ring, which is going to keep the bugs out, which is going to keep it clean. So it's a trial to see if it makes a difference. So pickles the second is called that because I took pickles and put it in this jar, and this is essentially the same starter as pickles. Because I had different jars that I started with originally, and they didn't do so well, but pickles thrived, so pickles has spread into other jars, whereas the other ones I had before, I actually just had to dump in the past week because they just did very poorly. Now let me get my bowl and spoon back from the sink. I'm just giving them a quick wash off. I'm not using soap, I'm not going crazy, I'm just using my fingers to wash it off for my next bit here. Alright, once I got everything here, I'll just get my towel and I'll dry it with my towel. And I'll put that on my scale. And my spoon. There. So, now I've got my second jar here. And I'm going to give this one a good stir. Just to make sure it's not separating at all. It's all nicey nice. Alright. So once you have your scale with your bowl on it, always start with the bowl on it so that it zeroes out. I'm going to do 0. And this one, I'm only going to keep a little bit because I don't need a lot. So this one, I'm going to do about 50 because I don't need 100. That's a lot. Alright, so I've got 50 in there. I'm going to take my discard jar here, and I'm going to pour the rest into it. And I'm definitely going to have to make some stuff with my discard today because I have a lot. Okay, so I'm done with my discard jar. I'm going to wipe the edge. Make sure it's nice and clean. Put the lid on this one. So this is not fed. Because this is not fed, I can put a regular top on it and I can screw it down. I do not need it to be able to breathe because it is going into the fridge and I haven't fed it. So let me put that in the fridge and then show you this other jar. You can have a cup of goldfish while I'm doing this. Okay, so now for this jar, I have 50. And I'm going to add another 50. Because I like doing a 1-to-1 ratio. But you can do like 50 and then add 100 or add 150 depending on how much starter you need and how active it is and different factors. Alright, so it says 100 and I need to say 150. Alright, there we go. And it doesn't have to be exact. You can be off a little bit. That's okay. You can have a little more, because I'm always a little heavy-handed and it always is fine. All right, now I'm going to mix this up. All right, so you can see that's really thick consistency. Now it's going into its jar. Scrape it all down, make sure it's all in there. Don't want to leave any in the bowl because it's going to get rinsed out. Alright, let me get another napkin. Clean the edges of my jar. Make sure it's nice and clean. Alright, now I'm going to put the top back on it. And that one is now done. And the rubber band needs to move down a little bit. And then I will label it. I got my marker right here. So this one I did 50 added in, and it is 9:30. All right. And that is how I feed my starters.